Hi, I'm Chris from airwindows, and I'm here talking about a new plugin that I've just come up with. Now, this is not literally quite a new plugin. This is ToVinyl 2. This is the second version of something that I've had out for a little while. ToVinyl is a plugin that does two things. The first thing that it does is it is one of your bass monoizer plugins, in that it's a mid-side plugin and does a kind of high passing on the side channel. The second thing that it does is what I'm going to demonstrate first, and that is it is a high frequency limiter. Now that is the sort of thing that you would find in traditional mastering studios. The bass monoizer is essentially elliptical EQ, but the high frequency limiter is what you would send to a record cutting lathe to avoid burning out the head on the thing. And what I'm doing with it is interesting here. I will fire up a test oscillator. And as you can hear, that is pink noise. You may notice you don't see a control for the high frequency limiter on there. And that's because I've identified a level setting for it, which I consider to be the sort of catch-all for stuff that is basically designed to be full-scale output. It's based off the principle that the pink noise is a wide-range musical type signal. Watch what happens when I take this pink noise. And here is Vox Echo Span, which I swear by. Demonstrating what we do with that. As you can see, that's in there. If I turn on ToVinyl, you don't hear much of a difference. This is a mono noise source. And with pink noise, it shouldn't be hurting the tone, but it also shouldn't be affecting things very much. Go up to full scale, and then back down. Now the point is, the high frequency limiter kicks in if the highs are too excessive. I'm defining excessive as energy that is higher than you get out of full scale pink noise in the extreme highs. And that would be, as you can see, around minus 30 or so dB. Now if we go over to white noise, you can see the different shape of the content there, but as it starts to go up, see it starts to flatten out. And if you push it harder, it really grabs on there. That will suppress the extreme highs to make them be in line with what you would have with the pink noise content. That is the level I came up with. Now, an important thing about this is that this level of high frequencies is extraordinarily high. Full-scale white noise is essentially too much energy for high frequencies. So one thing to bear in mind is that with normal mixes you might not actually hit this high frequency limiter. It's there as a sort of a safety catch for if you're pushing that energy and you want to keep it from becoming obnoxious. The reason I've got it set up the way that it is, let's see at about minus 7 dB, we're starting to see it really getting suppressed. Minus 6 is really kicking in. The thing with this algorithm for the high frequency limiting is that it was very difficult to set up because once you could hear it in action, it was already too much. it was affecting only the extreme highs and kicking in such a way. It's based on my de-esser algorithm. So it didn't turn out to be the sort of thing that you could effectively operate using a slider control, because it was you couldn't hear it. Basically, you couldn't hear it in action because it was excessively transparent. And as a result, if you set it to where you could hear it doing something, you were already setting it too high. So what I've done is I've built it into ToVinyl 2 as a kind of default energy setting. And if your mixes approximate in frequency level, I'm not going to say approximate to white noise because you don't want that, but supposing you have the balance of it so that you have a full range of frequencies, it may never kick in. You may never hit that limiter. But if you went into white noise, bam, suddenly it would be having a strong effect on the highs and controlling them. And as such, it would keep stuff in check. Also, a thing to bear in mind with the this particular form of high frequency control, if you're putting that kind of high frequency energy into the mix, you're already going to be running into problems anytime you hit something like MP3s or YouTube or anything that is lossy compression. Because when you start throwing that kind of energy into lossy compression, there is a large amount of data involved in handling all those high frequencies above 15K. And as such, it's going to tend to make stuff sound crappy and people can't actually hear it very well. I can demonstrate the as the highs are like -3, you can clearly see it's having a big effect on the metering. You can hear a difference in the sound, but pull it back to something a little more reasonable, it becomes harder to pick out the difference. And this is white noise. This is all what you would be able to hear a difference on. The point is, when you're throwing that kind of energy at a mix, not only would it produce problems with cutting actual record likers, but it can also produce problems with lossy compression like MP3s, YouTube, and all that kind of stuff. And it's also too high a level of high frequency content. You'd want to have something in there to catch that anyhow. Or at least that's my theory. You want to throw this on a mix and hear what it sounds like. You may hear no changes in the high frequencies at all. If you're hearing big changes in the high frequencies, I'd argue that maybe your highs are too loud in your mixes. But this is not only about highs, of course. This is also about lows. We've got high noise in here. And let's shut that off for a moment. Here we have a pink noise content, and we're going to demonstrate the bass center. This is essentially a elliptical EQ. It is a high pass on the side channel. But it's not only a high pass on the side channel. The previous design of this plugin, some people might have tried it out, and I strongly suggest you retry it out, because the frequency control was set to where it started to really kick in, and as a result it was having an effect way higher than it was set. I've changed that now. Now what you get when you have it set to, say, it defaults to 46 Hertz, which I think is a good basic thing, but if you have it set to 60 Hertz, you get a lot of mid content, and you can see that showing up on this other channel. And you're getting a certain amount of cutoff, but this is not really a mega high pass as far as whacking the extreme lows. It is a centering type thing. It's pulling the lows in and causing, I'm calling this bass center for a reason. As you can see there, it's kind of accentuating the 60 Hertz range. You pull it back down to, say, 46 where it started, or thereabouts, and it's accentuating the 46 Hertz range. It's cutting off below that to some extent, but I mean, I have a freebie for doing that. But what this is about is not simply, most people using this plugin are not going to be cutting stuff on vinyl record pressing lathes. And those who do probably have hardware for doing all this kind of stuff. And the point is that there are uses for this kind of thing outside of literally cutting that sort of thing. And one of them is, for instance, playing stuff back over PA speakers, where you might want to have the bass content pulled into the center. I'll hush this up for a moment. You might want to have the bass content pulled into the center so that it is effective at the lower frequency ranges rather than canceling out and being out of phase. That also has its place on normal stereo speakers. But with the big PA speakers and DJ sets and stuff like that, electronic music in other words, this could really come into its own because it's really got a capacity for centering those low frequencies, and at that bass center frequency, it's accentuating. Like I'll demonstrate by throwing it to about, say, 55 Hertz roughly. And you will hear a boost in the lows as they come together, but it's not actually boosting the overall energy, it's just bringing it together. It's actually throwing a high pass on the midband as well. But the high pass on the midband is about 4 times as low in frequency as the high pass on the side. And the interaction of those two things combines to cause a seeming accentuation at this frequency, the bass center frequency. You'll hear it now at around 55. You can see it on the metering. And I can also drop it down to around 42 or so. And we can more or less see it down there. The reason I picked these frequencies are that 42 is about the lowest frequency I could find that still seems to accentuate lows to some extent. It's bringing stuff out, but you're getting a reaction. And then the highest I have it set is about as high as I think you'd want to have stuff doing things. Do that now. It's around 70. And you can really hear where the rumble is kind of coming into its own. You might want to shut off one of your speakers or something in order to hear this more clearly. And normally you'll want it right around where I've got it defaulting around 46 Hertz, I think, for a impressive, very low frequency accentuation. And some types of music, some genres that you might be using, could be using entirely different settings, like 65 or whatever. You'll also want to consider this on things like, you could very easily throw that on a submix, for instance, on, say, heavy distorted guitars of the type like dual rectifiers or something like that, where there's a lot of heavy low frequency swing, and you're doing them basically in stereo pairs. You can throw this on there and fill up the lows, but control them and shape them in this way, and you might not even be having it centered around 46. For all I know, you might want to be having it, up around 70, or you might want you dial in the swing of the thing, basically. All of these things can be possible. Now, I mentioned how this wasn't necessarily a simple roll-off, like I'll demonstrate again. You can see all the way up at 76 Hertz or so, we're still getting lots of low frequencies in there. This is the centering plugin. This is not, it's shaping stuff, but this is not really just about wiping out lows. If you want to do that, I have a freebie. This is DC Offset. Go and download it. DC Offset is free. And if you set DC Offset to 46, watch the meter. That drops way down. If you set DC Offset to a much higher setting, bam. It's just wiping out the extreme low frequencies by being set up that high. And it's a really decent brick wall as far as that's concerned. This one is free. Go ahead and download it. ToVinyl 2 is, if you already own ToVinyl, it's free because you get free updates from my stuff basically forever if it's in the same category of thing. But if you haven't bought ToVinyl before, like if you tried it and you decided that the settings of the frequencies were confusing you or that something about it wasn't suiting you, it costs $50. That's $50 US dollars, whatever happens to US dollars. And I hope it works out well for you guys. It's the latest I've been able to do with this, and it's just following the I go back and forth between having a lot of controls on these things and simplifying them. This is one of the ones that's more simplified. It's set up in such a way that you can just instantiate it and you don't even have to look at it. It'll default to 46 Hertz. The high frequency limiter section is hardwired and should be exactly what you need because it's not really meant for dialing in. It was really hard to hear what that one did. It's based on the de-esser. The de-esser is very transparent, and I think I've identified basically the sweet spot for controlling extreme highs that way. If you have other sample rates, it will start kicking in a little faster at 48K, so the corner point, as it starts to do its roll-off here, the corner point will kick in a little earlier, so it'll still tend to revolve around 18K or so is the point that it will try to keep the same level between pink noise and white noise. And at the super high sample rates, like 96K, it does its entire thing at a higher rate but still has an effect. And I think that will do wonders as far as people sometimes have difficulty with the higher sample rates sounding kind of tinny and not even as good as lower sample rates in practice. And I think I've worked out how that works. I'd recommend throwing this on for stuff in high sample rates that sounds as if it's kind of a little bit more fragile and brittle than it's supposed to. It might do really good things with it. But yeah, basic design of this is you don't have to touch it very much. You just instantiate it and go. And it's $50. And I hope it works out. I hope it works out for you guys. Please try this out. This is one of the ones that I've designed that doesn't require a lot of fiddling. I always like those. Ideally, I'd have ones in which you didn't even touch them at all. Some of them that I've got, like Mudslide, the freebie Mudslide, has no controls whatsoever. The console system used without any other parts has no controls whatsoever, so you just instantiate the plugins and there's nothing to see in them. This has one control, it has bass center, but it doesn't have a lot of fiddle room, and you just want to pick an area to voice it. You pick that based on the hertz level. You saw that it lines up pretty well this time around. I really hope this works out for people. I do my best. So good luck with ToVinyl 2, and I hope it works out for you guys, and I hope that I sell some of these. Thanks. And thank you for letting me work for you. Bye-bye.